Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. Recently I was tagged by Gareth at Books, Songs and Other Magic to do the If I Owned a Bookshop, yabba dabba 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 do book tag. And so here is my attempt. Gareth has a channel that talks a lot about books. He also occasionally talks about music. There's a tag been going around. This one created by Robert G. at Robert G. Reader of Books. Now, it may well be that Robert G. tagged me as well, but I don't know. He usually doesn't. I appreciate that. But for some reason, whenever he tags me, I never get a notification. YouTube works in mysterious ways, but I did get a notification that Gareth had notified me. I will put a link to Robert G's video and Gareth's video. I've seen a few others. Gareth has the unique fortune of having worked in retail, both in the vending of books and of music. And so he brought a lot of insight, practical insight, to the topic. I will do nothing of the sort. As a general principle, I do not especially endorse commerce. I understand some good has come of it occasionally, but put that aside. Now, this tag has various prompts, and I will do the prompts, but they are probably going to come much later in the video. So I will put a timestamp in the description box so you can skip over all of the front matter, if you will. Now, I'm just trying to think, what am I forgetting here? I've got my handful of props. I keep thinking that I'm forgetting something, which generally means that I am forgetting something. But be that as it may, I was thinking about I've talked about how I wound up as a lad, well, not a lad, as a young man. My first employment, I worked temp for a long time. I took other jobs in between times, which I also considered as temp jobs, even though those who employed me, who hired me, did not know that. One guy for some kind of photography company said, "Our company is going to be moving in a couple months. Are you sure you're going to be with us through this transition?" I said, "Yeah, you know, that's how you would do in the interview." And he was so impressed with me, and I usually would not get jobs. He hired me. But then that night he called me and said, "It just doesn't sit well with me. I have to rescind that off." It was fine, you know. I don't know, you know, and nowadays you'd probably sue, but he was very wise to have done that. But I wound up working in Evanston a lot. I first tried to work in the city of Chicago, and my typing skills were not of quality, let me say. I wound up doing a lot of sort of heavy lifting type of work. I worked for a canteen corporation that handled all the vending machines everywhere. I imagine they are still extant, and it was just really grueling stuff. And somewhere somebody said, "Well, you know, maybe you should try working up in Evanston. Their requirements are not so stringent." So I did, and yeah, my typing speed of whatever, 40 words per minute, with no mistakes, was just what was needed. Of course, in the temp field, actually none of those skills really mattered unless you were At a somewhat later time, people would be typing and they would be on machines that counted their finger strokes. And when it went into that kind of business, then your capabilities really did matter. But I was doing a lot of data entry, and ultimately, well, for one, accuracy did matter. But another thing I realized, these tests were sort of a winnowing thing. What they really ultimately wanted was just somebody that they could get along with. Now, nobody in my life has ever really been all of that interested in hiring me. But once I have found myself in the job, generally I've worked pretty well, and they've been happy to let me keep on doing it. So at one of these jobs in Evanston, it may well have been Vogue Fabrics or something. A lot of places that are gone. This is going to be a big stroll down memory lane. I walked around and found nearby an old-time bookstore called Great Expectations. Of course, I didn't really know the reference point there. I do now, and did enjoy the book that it was taken from. But I thought I would see if the bookstore was still in business. One other time I did that, and indeed at that time it was. But I did so recently and found out no, it is not in business. And I found an interesting article talking about the bookstore, and I would like to share it with you. This is from the Daily Northwestern, titled End of a Chapter by Rani Gupta, September 23, 2001. Great Expectations, one of Evanston's last independent bookstores, will close its doors at the end of the month after 52 years in business. Through September, the store will sell titles at 75% off. Owner Jeff Rice is busy liquidating the store's inventory, selling books back to publishers and other bookstores. The Russian Press Service, a mail-order bookseller, already is occupying the space at 911 Foster Street. Rice said recent developments in the book industry drove Great Expectations out of business. The economics of the industry changed, he said. They couldn't allow us to be the kind of bookstore we wanted to be. Rice said internet booksellers such as Amazon.com took away from the bookstore's mail order business, for which they were known worldwide in the philosophy field. Chain stores such as Barnes & Noble and Borders Books and Music stole easy sales that Great Expectations depended on to keep its selection of backlisted academic titles that take longer to sell. We needed those money-in-the-bank sales to subsidize what we really wanted to carry, he said. Rice said publishers, especially university presses, who were once more lenient with extending credit to independent bookstores. We were dependent on publishers indulging our attempts to keep an extensive backlist, he said, but the indulgence of publishers has gradually eroded. John Eklund, a sales representative for Harvard University Press, Yale University Press, and Massachusetts Institute of Technology Press, said university presses have recently changed their policies toward independent bookstores. It used to be that small presses could extend credit indefinitely, Eklund said, but university presses have been under the same kind of financial demand as bigger publishers are. We have had to be more strict about people paying bills. To make up for lost business, Great Expectations increased textbook sales to about 100 courses. Last year, textbooks, which once made up only 25% of business, totaled 75%. But textbooks proved to be costly to stock. Books are very expensive, and there's the built-in assumption that bookstores make a lot of money, Rice said. Many times I've had to move heaven and earth to get books only to find that I didn't sell them. And to make room for textbooks, Rice had to decrease the store's regular inventory. We were forced by circumstances to become less and less a scholarly-oriented store and more a textbook store, he said. Rather than watch the store dwindle further, I decided to just call an end to it. Many Northwestern students and faculty members regarded the closing of Great Expectations as a blow to the NU community. The bookstore was founded in 1949 by Bob Geary, who often bailed customers out of jail when they were arrested for unpaid parking tickets. Later, Truman Metzel Jr. brought the store to prominence as owner from 1961 to 1995, and that would have been when I was going there, and I remember seeing him in the store. Great Expectations is one of those places that's becoming so rare with all the over-competition from Borders and Barnes & Noble, said Mark Thatcher, a Weinberg sophomore. I could just walk in there and browse and find any book that I wanted. It has an atmosphere that no other place has. I am deeply saddened both professionally and personally, said Carl Smith, a professor of English, history, and American studies. Great Expectations has, through my career at Northwestern, been one of the major intellectual resources in the area and a wonderful place to visit and hang out. English Associate Professor Paul Breslin said faculty members in disciplines such as English and philosophy would use the store as a meeting place. I understand that things like that might appeal more to faculty and graduate students than undergraduates, Breslin said. But if there's a place for faculty in different disciplines to interact, it benefits people at all levels of the university, even though the benefits may be more obvious to some people. This is going long, but it's really a nice piece, I think. The bookstore tried to stock books that made people question their own knowledge, Rice said. It was a center of argument and intellectual conflict, he said. Nobody in this bookstore ever shied away from a good argument. For Rice, the loss is deeply personal. As an undergraduate at NU, he visited the store often, and he worked at Great Expectations before taking over as owner in 1995. It's very sad, Rice said. I've never been associated with Northwestern when I was not associated with Great Expectations. Except when I was out of town, I've never gone a week without going into the store. But the closing of Great Expectations is not entirely unexpected. Throughout the North Shore and the country, independent bookstores are struggling against the forces of internet and chain stores. Rice said that when he tells friends in the book business about the store's closing, their reaction is amazement that we lasted as long as we did. What's happening in the store is microcosmic of what's happening in the industry at large, Rice said. Rice will teach a history course at NU this quarter and is writing a book about the transformation of the book industry. Jack Cella, who owns the Seminary Co-op bookstore, 5757 South University Ave, said he had to adapt. Just an interjection, if you've seen me read Claude McKay and point out my favorite Claude McKay book, The Selected, that was bought at Seminary Co-op Books. He said he had to adapt to the industry turn by taking orders online. It's a very difficult environment for independent bookstores in general, especially ones that focus on the academic market. Cella said, scholars are the most computer literate group of people you can find. Amazon.com and online purchasing in general have made tremendous inroads to that group. Some publishers and bookstore owners worry that the decline of independent bookstores could make it hard for riskier books to find sellers. Eklund said stores like Great Expectations would stock books the owner deemed important, even though those books might still be harder to sell. But chain stores will not take similar risks. While overall sales are not declining, the types of books published could change. We should ask Steve Donahue if his experience bears that out. It's not so much actual sales, but a cultural change in what's going to get published down the line. I worry about homogenizing. It's going to be harder to publish more challenging books that don't have a huge guaranteed sales and aren't on sexy, popular topics. Well, things have really shifted in various ways. There was that period, but now, I mean, as far as self-pub and so forth, things have opened broadly. Now, I should mention one thing that I would suspect Steve Donahue and I have in common. While I believe he worked at Barnes & Noble for a long time, we both date back to a time when Barnes & Noble and Borders Bookshop were not really a thing. I'm not sure what years those respective companies got started, but they didn't make it into Chicago until after my initial book buying phase. Borders in Chicagoland was just phenomenal. The first one opened in Oak Brook, and I just remember, wow. And I had family nearby, and I would travel out there occasionally, and I was told about it. But it was real difficult to get from the city to Oak Brook, so I never went there as often, as frequently as I would like. And Barnes & Noble, on the other hand, never in the Chicagoland area in any of its locations was ever very good. We had one in the city on, I don't know, Diversey or something, and there was one up in Evanston. Okay, but Borders never really went beyond okay. So that was that piece. Realizing that my book buying habits have probably changed. At Great Expectations, you would easily find stuff like this. And I'm going to guess that I bought it there because look at all of these notes. I mean, I would never buy a book. Well, you can't even see this with notes like that now. Well, I might if it was really something. I would prefer not to. And they had a lot of these Burton Watson translations, and I'm going to bet I didn't get this one there. This was probably a more recent acquisition at the charity bookshop, and newer editions have changed the covers. But I mean, how can you beat this for class? You know. But another aspect, they had so much philosophy, so much, you could just look and see the stuff at Great Expectations. And that was not really even my primary Evanston bookstore. It was just one I went to for a span because I was working real close. Did I say it was Vogue Fabrics or Vogue Cleaners? I don't remember. I worked at both places, temp, and I don't even remember where any of these places are anymore. But I remember seeing these books there, and lusting after them. Most of the stuff that I would see there I couldn't buy. And many years later, when I became an adult with some income, I took the plunge and bought them. I've realized I will probably never read them at this point. I'm not so sure how much I love Aristotle. I've read a couple of his books, I think. The Nicomachean Ethics and the Poetics or something. And there might be another one. And I'm not sure how much in full or in part. I really don't remember. I'm more of a Plato man, if you know what I mean. I like my philosophy Platonic. Instead of all of that birds and the bees stuff. So, Great Expectations whet my appetite for things, but there are other And I think about all of the now gone bookstores in Evanston and elsewhere. And so I thought this is going to be a rambling excursion, as I say. Also in Evanston, a marvelous bookstore that everybody in the city loved was called Bookman's Alley. I didn't really like it, to be honest with you. It was huge. It was like around the alley, and it was rooms and buildings and stuff. I don't know even how it was laid out. I never ever found anything of any interest to me except for some sheet music once. There was another store that existed for a while, and I wouldn't even know where it was. I think I know the street that it was on, and it was a regular storefront, and it seemed to have a lot of sort of things that might be used in schools, I guess, and a book that I picked up there that changed my life. Well, I don't know if it changed my life, but this wonderful John Maynard Keynes. I mean, somebody recently was talking about this and said, oh, you only need to read selections from this. Well, I guess, but why would you want to do that? I mean, shudder. And you have to understand that in the days before easy internet access, I mean, you were really struggling to find books. I have a couple of others, essays in persuasion and essays in biography, I think, which took me years to find. I think the economic consequences of the piece, also worth reading, was easier to find. But and at that same bookshop, there were a couple of guys in one day. They were just really flabbergasted by the wonderful selection. And there was one textbook, a yellow textbook, calculus textbook. And the guy said, man, this book, and I can't remember the name, Thomas or something, this book is the best thing ever about calculus. You just get this, and you don't need anything else. This will really set you up straight with calculus. So I bought it. I held on to it for many years, and of course never read it. Those of you who witnessed my attempt to read Euclid recently, well, that's an open square in my document, I guess. I don't know what the right word is. Commerce is not for me in my ledger. So, and at some point I got rid of it and always regret my lack of calculus. Sadly, in those days, struggling to earn a dime, and it was seldom more than a dime, if you know what I mean, really interrupted things, plus all of the normal things that kids do, as well as the abnormal ones, such as writing. I think that's it for my Evanston bookstores, except for Amaranth Books, which opened at some point while I was working down there. Real small shop, but very well curated. And I don't know what I bought there as a young man. I think possibly my Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, which I have not read. And more recently, because he is still in business, just to give you an example, he often has good New York Review of Books titles for $4, $5. And so anytime I'm in his shop and I see anything with this imprint, I pick it up. I let one or two things slide. I've got some essays by Max Beerbaum and some other things. All of the, is it J.T. Farrell, the Singapore Grip, the Troubles, and the other one, the one that's in between. I read the first two and have not read the Singapore Grip. I bought them from his shop just because I like the publisher and the price was right. Let me take you back a little bit earlier, though, to the earliest days. There were what are they called? Shopping mall bookstores, and one of those was titled B. Dalton. They had a competitor, and I forget, which has an affiliation with somebody else, but I can't remember. I keep thinking Walmart, but it's not that. It's something like that. But I'm pretty sure that my earliest encounter with Franz Kafka came from B. Dalton bookstore. I don't know if the Castle came from the same shop. It may well be that I went back to the same shop and found it. And these are my preferred editions. Now, I inherited from my friend / in some ways literary mentor, Marcia, her lovely hardbound copy. I think the interior is essentially the same. And I love this book, but I cannot give up my old book for sentimental reasons, I guess. My time living in the city, I have different books with different associations, and so this is what I'm going to walk you through. Recently, on the channel Book Chat with Pat, Pat showed her copy of Milton. This is John Milton. Let's see if I can give you $4. Complete poems. This is just such a wonderful book. And this too has a lot of notes scribbled in, which nowadays I would rather not have them, but it didn't bother me at the time, I guess. It's interesting how one changes. And it also has the prose section is in multiple columns, 2 columns, and I really dislike books in 2 columns. Come to think of it, I think it's an Oxford edition of Spencer, which I found in this one bookstore on Lincoln Avenue that is long gone. I would never be able to tell you where or it was or anything. Also at that same shop, I bought a Library of America Walt Whitman in a box. I mean, just nice stuff. On Lincoln Avenue, we also had a branch of Powell's Books, and I really liked that branch. There was another branch, and still is, down in the University of Chicago area. But the one on Lincoln Avenue was my favorite, and I knew the mother of a woman who managed the store. We were office mates, I guess. I was working temp at a place, but long-term at a place where this woman's mother also was doing data entry. There would be, lots and lots of us doing data entry. And that's going to lead on to something else. But let me stick with Powell's for a minute. After I discovered my Moses Finley, I do not have the first copy of, and I regret that I got rid of it, just again for sentimental reasons. Though it is obviously the text that's important, and that text had gotten so yellowed, I replaced it with a hardback, and then that text got so yellowed. I thought it would be better. I bought that at Unabridged Books up in Uptown, which was a marvelous store. I think that they were gay and lesbian focused, but that was not an exclusivity. and just really well stocked. But at Powell's Books at University of Chicago, and you didn't get to these places very often. I don't think that I went to that area but maybe twice in all of the years I was living in the city and dependent upon the bus. You took number 7 Jeffrey bus or something, but I found my wonderful Economy and Society in Ancient Greece, which I mentioned recently, and of course, Ancient Slavery, which led me to both of these. Slavery, in fact, slavery is featured in this one quite a bit, and the just marvelous essays, I'll tell you what they are if you want to read them. Was Greek civilization based on slave labor? Between slavery and freedom? The servile statuses of ancient Greece, debt bondage, and the problem of slavery. I mean, those essays are just eye-opening. You will never think about the topic the same way again. Now, just as another aside, and it is really hard to know exactly when all of this stuff was occurring. On Howard Street, I think, at the corner of Howard and Ridge, so right on the border to Evanston, one of the buses I took would go by was a Peking Books. I think it may have been Peking Books and then subsequently Beijing Books. I'm not sure anymore. And it was a bit of a mess. I mean, you couldn't find anything. A very kindly proprietor. And I made the leap from the data entry position I had because another woman that was also doing data entry was this man's wife, and it was well known, I think, that her doing the data entry probably kept his bookstore afloat. But it was a marvelous place. People all over the place went to this guy to get books on Chinese culture and so forth. One time he recommended to me the book The Scholars, and I did not take him up on it. And much later, though, I was trying to find something, and I don't know what it was, but I couldn't find it anywhere. And I keep thinking it pertains to the Peony Pavilion, but this is my version of the Peony Pavilion, available at lulu.com. But that puts it at 2004, and surely in 2004 I had internet access, and whatever I was looking for could have been found. But I was looking for something real specific, but something that should have been pretty easy to find. I mean, should have been in a bookshop, and he was not helpful at all. He said, but I do have some Chinese pornography that you might be interested in. I said, no, because I was planning to write this, I think, and I just really wanted what I wanted. Now I wish I had taken him up on the offer, of course. So that's that. I should say, in Chicago, and even when I was young, growing up in the suburbs, a major store also, B. Dalton and the other one were, I keep thinking they're calling them supermarket, mall, shopping mall, bookstores. But the real kingpin in Chicago, I think, was Crocs and Brentano's. I mean, they were a great store. They were there, and I actually tried to get a job there, and really wanted to work at a bookstore. As I say, nobody would ever hire me, and a very good friend of mine found out that I had applied, and then he went and got the job and hated the job. But what an asshole to do something like that. And I was happy that the job was not a happy one for him. But I don't think it would have been for me either, so it worked out. On the Crocs and Brentanos kick, I can't even remember now where all of them were. There was a main store down on Michigan Avenue. In the basement, they had all of their art books. My partner's aunt actually worked as a manager down there. And that was the place you would go if you wanted to get those big, is it Singletary or Singleton translations of Dante? They might have some of them. They came in like, it was 6 volumes. I'm trying to see, I don't have a book of the right. Well, they came in like 6 volumes of at least this thickness. 3 with the bilingual text and 3 with the notes. And I always wanted them. They never had all of them, and I could never afford that kind of thing anyhow. And even now online, they're exorbitant. I believe the translation has been reprinted, but without all of everything. And so it wouldn't be that useful at this time anyhow. But there was a smaller one off on, I think, Adams Street. So on the South Loop. And one day I was there and just happened to find this book. And I mean, look at the price. I mean, can you see that? Like $4. Just incredible. And when my friend Marcia died and I was put in charge of handling all her books, she wanted me to do it, and she said, take anything you want, and I did. And she had this same book in a very nice edition. There was some difference about it. I can't remember. One was thicker and one was thinner or something. And I really wanted to keep her book, but I liked mine with the price tag on it so much, and I thought, well, I could keep her book and put my jacket on it, but then I just decided, no, heck with it. I will just keep it as is. And it's been a marvelous book. It's really the go-to place for Wallace Stevens, I think, for his poetry, of course. Now, there was a Crocs and Brentanos and it may also have been on Michigan Avenue. It may have been in the Loop area. I just don't remember, or not so far as the big one, that also was a nice place. It was in that store that I first discovered K.C. Chang, and it was in that store that I picked up this book by Bernard Lewis before I went on to my deep dive into the study of slavery. And this is just a marvelous book too. But these kinds of things were just readily on the shelves. So those were Chicago bookstores. And another just kind of note, I've said this before, there was an art book publisher, Rizzoli. They might still exist, but they also had bookstores. And they were a good place for art books as well, of their own imprint, I believe, but pretty costly. But I was there one time, and this was in Water Tower Place, which has this most interesting fountain going up, but I don't know how fares the mall these days anymore. I have not gone there for a long time, and a lot of storefronts had gotten emptied. I did go there for some purpose recently, and it was interesting, the changes, but I can't remember what they were. But at this Rizzoli bookstore, I found a nice copy of Dante, the Vita Nuova, and took it up to the cash register, and the young woman there said, "Oh my God," she said, "I have read this book. It's just so beautiful. This is just so beautiful." And I remember that. After returning from my journey, I began looking for this lady that my Lord had named while traveling the road of sighs. To make a long story short, in a brief time, I made her so completely my defense that many people commented more than courtesy would permit, and so I often found myself gravely concerned. This is the Mark Musa translation. I like his translation. I think Penguin had a complete Divine Comedy with this in a one-volume edition, I think. Somebody did. So then we can go farther afield. I just picked this up in a neighborhood box, Jabberwocky. I'm sure I won't keep it, but I will look at it because I didn't know such a book existed. I'm only familiar with what I've seen in various anthologies or quoted in other places or put to music, because sometimes in my chorus we would sing some of this stuff. So I want to give it a once over, but then I will put it back. Also in that same box was a new edition of in this edition of The Prince by Machiavelli, but I recently read that a year or two ago. I reread it, and I don't think I will reread it again. So I left it there for someone else. It will probably serve another person better than it would me. So I was just thinking about different shops, far flung, and one of the shops that I just have fond memories of really was in Madison, Wisconsin. My partner and I went up there a number of times. Early on, we took my little poodle there, the one that's on the back cover of that one book, and the poodle was very nice. We'd be in the parking garage or whatever, and the dog would sit in the back seat while we roamed around for things. And we went there sometime later. We've been there a number of times because if you're coming from certain places, you tend to pass through there. So we would often stop. And I think the last time we were there, we brought the other dog and we tried the same trick and it did not work. And we got a warning, not a citation, but a warning which said, if you ever come back here again, do not do this. I mean, we were in a parking garage. It was not a hot day or anything. So the dog was not in any risk. But this dog, I think, made it be known that she was not happy being there. But there was a marvelous bookstore called, I think it was Canterbury Books or Canterbury. Let's see if the thing says, the thing don't say nothing. And they were just really a nice place to go and visit. I think they had a little coffee shop and so forth. And one time I was there and they had a whole bunch of the German library. I mean, I think there must have been 40 or 50 volumes, and look at this. They were all $2. I mean, $2. $2. I mean, and I bought these, George Buchner. Who is this? Nathan the Wise, Mina von Barnhelm, and other plays and writings, just because they seemed most interesting to me, and the plays by Heinrich von Kleist. Always with good intentions. I mean, I've picked up things here and there with good intentions. Never read them. And I left everything else because I knew there was no sense in being greedy about it. Steve Donahue once owned this entire set and read them all and is sorry that he got rid of it, I am sure. So there was that. I'm trying to think if there are any other far-flung bookshops that I can talk about. Well, the furthest flung would be back when I was a lad in Taipei. I say lad, but I was a young man. And that was where I discovered Bertolt Brecht, my wonderful bootleg copies of the Threepenny Opera, Galileo, and Mother Courage. I have others which I purchased subsequently coming home, and these remain my favorite, but Cave's Books, Cave's Bookstore. Let's see, there should be a ticket in here. And I believe the bookstore is still here. I think Freddie at the Sluggish Reader recently went there. But I would imagine they have changed. And it was the place where every white guy went. And I was there at a time when there weren't a lot of white guys. But so the bookstore did not like cater to a white patronage. It catered to a mix. And interestingly enough, there was another store, and it was known as Cross Books, C-R-O-S-S, but I looked at the tag, and it says Qinshan. I thought it was Cross, but Qinshan, it must have been Qinshan. So I don't know where I got that from. And it was there that I came upon this marvelous Leonardo on the human body. I love this book. I mean, what a great find when I was a young man. I mean, just marvelous. I mean, try to show you some. Now, what is this? Oh my goodness. Left leg front view of a healthy knee. I better look at this because I do not have a healthy knee. About 5 weeks ago or so, my dog plowed into me. I've been doing some physical therapy, but my sense is it's not going to get better. Everyone thinks it's not really a big deal, so that's fine. Doctors never care about your pain, and I know I can live with pain. I mean, I've done it before, and still. But, I mean, just what a marvelous thing. This is just such a great book. And they had stacks of them, and I have no idea why they had stacks of them. And the other book that was there, I think it was something like To the Light or something. It was a slim paperback by somebody named Lila Beck or Lilla Beck or something, L-I-L-A-B-E-K. I don't remember anymore. It was a new agey thing talking about chakras and stuff. And I really liked that book. I just found it super interesting. And this was, of course, before internet. And one time years ago, I think I actually did find it, and for some reason I just decided it was not worth the price to get. I should look it up, but when I've tried to find it, I can't find it again. So I'll think about that. But just what a great, great find in Taipei. This was not a bookstore that we would, anyone would normally go to. They were a bit pricey. This was, I think it said 580 NT. I don't know what that would have been at the time. I just don't remember. Of course, I was making better money then, relatively speaking. So let me get on to the tag. Now this is going to be hard to see, and my phone might run out, so I'll try to go through it fairly quickly. If I had a bookstore, as I say, I am generally speaking somewhat averse to commerce. You can have it. What are the hours of operation? This is hard because it's so entirely a hypothetical. But I would start early, just because I wake up early. And taking the customer into account, it would be open 7 days a week till 9 at night. But taking myself into account, I would close it at 3. 2, is there ambient music? What kind? There probably would be, because generally, if I have somebody working for me, they would want some kind of music. And if there were customers, they might want music as well. For myself, it wouldn't matter. I remember for a while, my father had fallen and his kidney failed and he was on dialysis. And for a while, he was staying at a place where they did dialysis treatments. And while they were doing them, the televisions were on, and he always laughed because the televisions were on for the staff. None of the patients wanted the dialysis. He recovered from that. It was just a temporary kidney failure. 3, is there a coffee bar? Do you serve alcohol? Yes, indeed, a coffee bar. Probably no alcohol, although I don't know, maybe there could be some wine Thursdays or something, Thursday evenings, if you had a special Thursday evening. I recently was at Cincinnati, and there was a Schuler's bookstore or something. I bought a couple of nice things, and I didn't bring them out. I should have. That was like an ideal of what you might find for a bookstore these days. So I would, and I think Gareth said some pastries. I think scones, which I think he might have said scones, something like that. That would be great, I think. 4, are patrons encouraged to linger? Are there comfortable chairs? What kind of lighting? Are there tables? Are there areas for group gatherings? I'd probably say okay with that. Why not? As he says, bookstores can become places for community. And if you want or that article may have said that, if you want a bookstore to thrive, I think having some sort of community surrounding it is probably a good idea. Is there live entertainment, poetry readings, authors reading from their current works, lectures in literature? Yes, of course, there would be that. I was lucky enough when my first book, The Requiem, came out. I was able to give readings here and there, and actually Barnes & Noble was a very open venue for that, and made sales here and there. I I know I read at the one in Evanston, and I think at the one on wherever. I think the writer who I at one time really liked, but have since waned in my seen my enthusiasm wane for. Sven Burkertz worked at Borders or Barnes and Noble with the original brothers or something. It might have been, I don't know. He talks about it a lot. And everybody, I mean, half of the BookTube force at one time worked at a Barnes and Noble, just so that you are aware. I am, of course, I have never been able to get a job at a bookstore, never been able to get a job at a library. And I often wanted one at a library, but I've only many years later learned that librarians are, generally speaking, not people who have any interest in books. They have an interest in getting a good pension. Number 6, I mean, I'm not putting that down. And one of my friends worked at a library here and was somewhat my overseer when I ran an open mic gig for a period of time. And his main function was to provide entertainment at the library and bring in singers and so forth. So we have a Chicago area cellist, I think, Rachel Barton Pine. She comes from a musical family, and for example, her sister one time came and performed at the library, and he put on a lot of cabaret events that were really incredibly popular with the community. Number 6, where is your bookstore located? In the busy heart of a large city, in a neighborhood of a large city, in a suburban strip mall, in a small town, in a rural area. Well, ideally, I think my aforementioned Beijing Books at the corner of Howard and Ridge was ideal. It was in such a location that nobody would go to. I mean, you had to be lucky to see it on the bus and then be interested. That was not the area for a bookstore. Far away, and nobody is likely to be on one of those buses anyhow. But to me, that's the ideal place for a bookstore. And then, number 7, how does your bookstore look from the outside? Sleek and modern, dark and brooding. Sleek and modern, I guess, if I could go for it. If you're ever in Evanston, go look at the window at Amaranth Books, and I love how it looks from the outside. Number 8, what's your specialty? Used books, new and used, only fiction, only nonfiction, fiction and nonfiction. Does your bookstore specialize in a particular genre? It would be probably pretty much anything, but it would be used, I think, primarily. I really like a well-done used and new bookstore. Now, that one in Cincinnati, if that's where it was, it was mainly new, and then they had a section off that was used, and what was used was not very good. It was not really well handled. I've been to other bookstores where they have new and used kind of intermingled, interspersed, and done very nicely, but I can't remember which those were. I think the writer Alice Munro had a bookstore, and I think I went to that one, but I don't remember it. Number 9, what's the name of your bookstore? This is tough. I didn't think about this one. And And I think Gareth said Curiouser and Curiouser Books, something like that. I love that title. If I can get mine in around the same time, he's over there, I'm over here, there shouldn't be any kind of conflict unless we both decide to go, or each decide to go international, respectively. So tag some friends. I should say that more likely, were I to try to man and manage a bookstore, it would probably wind up being more like the kind of bookstore which I detest. And the bookstore that stands out in my memory was from a time in Scotland, in Glasgow. And we were going from one place to another place and decided to take a long walk. And just on that way was this famous bookstore, and it was Voltaire and Rousseau, or Rousseau and Voltaire. And I said to my, we've got to stop in. So we took a little bit of a detour, and it was down at a dead end street. There was a stream or something. Walked in the place, and it was one of these bookstores, and I've never seen one as bad as, well, I may have, but just, there's bookshelves and stuff, but then books everywhere piled up about as high as a person's shoulders, and just everywhere. And I hate that, because you can't find anything in the store that you want. It's not even worth trying to hunt for something in that kind of store. I came to much prefer the type of bookstore that you have with half-price books. I think I discovered my first half-price books actually in Madison, Wisconsin, and since have been to others. And there was a period when I decided I was going to try to build a library. This was fairly early on yet. And I like them because the prices are good. The books are always in good shape. You don't have all of these scribbles and stuff. Sometimes you do, but you don't have to pick those up. And they have probably raised the bar a little bit for me as far as the quality of books. Nowadays, like if it's too yellow, I just will put it back, even as something I dearly want. The only trouble with half-price books is you can't go into them now and get something that you want, at least not the ones here. When I go to another city, when I'm on the East Coast, I generally find, to the extent that our schedule permits going into a bookshop, which sometimes it does, the selection is a lot better than what we have in Chicago. A lot of these really wonderful bookstores are gone. Just down Clark Street, we had, there was one that was on the east side that had this marvelous sign in the window, and it closed only relatively recently. I forget the name of it, but it had a big sign. Used books, rare, medium, well done. And I've always admired that sign. I wish when I found out that he was going out of business, I had ran and tried to get that sign, but I bet somebody else did. Just, it was, but I don't think I ever bought there, because he was a little bit with that kind of pile up and you can't see anything. There was another one down the street, which everybody knew and everybody liked, on the way towards Wrigley Field. And it was okay. I can't remember the name of it, but there was another one near to it as well that everybody overlooked that was just a real marvelous bookstore. And one time, to talk about books that I didn't buy, for this hardback Emily Dickinson, I saw it there once, and I think it was $10, and I really wanted it. And I couldn't justify spending $10 on a hardbound Emily Dickinson. And so I let it pass. And when I was able to, I did. But my discovery was that I didn't need the hardbound. I regretted not having bought that book for years, but once again, I prefer my original paperback, and that's the one that is generally my go-to. I gave some readings with this and the other one that we have in this house. We have 3 copies of this book for no real good reason. And a book that I did buy at that shop, which I wish I could show you, but I would never be able to find it, was a book about yoga by Walter B. Gibson. And if you don't know who Walter B. Gibson is, you have not been watching Michael K. Vaughan's channel. He is one of the preeminent authors of The Shadow. He wrote under the pseudonym of, or the pen name of, Maxwell Grant, but other writers used Maxwell Grant as well. Meanwhile, Walter B. Gibson wrote all kinds of books about magic and just anything. I mean, he was an incredibly prolific writer. I used to have some kind of a memoir by him in one of my shadow books, and it's a very business-like book about yoga. I don't know. I'm sure I could find it if I needed to, but I miss the days of these old bookstores. I mean, as I say, most people on BookTube start with Barnes and Noble, and persons such as me and Steve Donahue, and I can't think of anybody else, can remember to a time before Borders and Barnes and Noble came onto the scene and what the bookstores were like. Now, the real true independent bookstores have had something of a resurgence, I think, after Amazon wiped out Borders and Barnes and Noble. I mean, Barnes and Noble here is mainly a shop for games and toys and children's stuff. I mean, children's books. I mean, but less so in Chicago, I think, though I don't get out much, but in towns and stuff, when you happen to be on the road, the chances of walking into a good used bookstore are pretty good. But as the article that I read foretold, the things published have changed as well. And so you just cannot find that obscure niche item as you once might have. Everything has much more of a mainstream feel to it than it did in those days. And it was a great time to be prowling the old bookstores, and I wish now that I had paid them more attention. So I will leave off here. Thank you, Robert G., reader of books, for inventing this tag. You may well remember unabridged, not unabridged, well, you may remember that too, Great Expectations. And Gareth, thank you for tagging me as well. Thank you for stopping by my channel.